The film begins with a party at the home of Dean and Bunny, where several couples participate in a game. The game involves balancing a plate with a glass of alcohol on their heads, and Bunny ultimately wins. Meanwhile, Alice and Jack, another couple, sneak away for a drive and do donuts in Jack's car. The following morning, Alice prepares breakfast for Jack, and the two seem to have a picture-perfect relationship. They live in Victory Town, a 1950s-style community where all the wives see their husbands off as they leave for work at the same time, heading to Victory Base Camp in the desert. The men's jobs are supposedly in technology. After Jack leaves, Alice spends her time at home with Bunny and the other wives. Later, Alice and the others attend a dance class taught by Shelley, who is married to Frank, the founder of the Victory Project. During the class, they meet a new woman named Violet, whose husband Bill is also working at the HQ with the other men. The next day, everybody in the community goes to Frank and Shelley's home as they host a party and examine the next step in their Victory Project. One lady, Margaret, speaks up and says that they are not supposed to be there. Her husband Ted pulls her away before she starts to form a scene. Other ladies converse around Margaret, being disturbed as she walked her child out into the desert, and he vanished, with Margaret claiming that he was taken from her before she was recovered. Alice goes back into the house during the party, where Jack finds her and begins kissing her. Frank unobtrusively walks into the room and observes them having sex, but Jack doesn't notice, and Frank leaves without saying anything. Alice afterward takes a trolley out of town and into the desert. She looks up at the sky and notices a plane showing up to go down and crash into the side of the mountain where Victory HQ is. Alice tells the trolley driver to go there, but he says it isn't part of his route. Then Alice continues on foot and goes up the mountain, where she doesn't discover a plane, but instead shows up to discover a mirror. When she touches it, she sees frequenting visuals of drops of blood and ladies in synchronization, in conjunction with hearing Frank's voice. Alice wakes up back in her room with Jack, saying she was home when he returned and was there for hours, in spite of the fact that Alice has no memory of making it back home. The next morning, Alice gets a phone call from Margaret, who inquires about the plane that she saw. After Alice denies it, she tells Margaret not to call her again, despite the latter's supplications. Alice afterwards sees Margaret standing on the roof of her house. She runs to undertake and offer assistance, but Margaret looks at her and slits her own throat and falls off the roof. Then some men in ruddy suits appear to drag Alice away while handling Margaret's body. Seeing her wife panicking, Jack calls Dr. Collins to appear at the house to check on Alice. Collins states that Margaret required stitches after everybody says that she fell out of her window while cleaning it. After he decides that Alice must be exhausted, Alice holds up for Jack and Collins not to be looking so she can go through his bag and drag out a record on Margaret, which is labeled security risk. Alice goes through the record and finds most of it blacked out with small supportive data, so she burns the record. Alice begins to end it up haunted by strange dreams and events. During her dance class, she sees an image of Margaret crushing her head against the mirror, causing her to crack out in front of everybody. At home, she tries to cook eggs, but finds the shells are empty and purge. While taking a shower, Alice slips into the water, and her reflection shows up to see back at her. At night, Alice and Jack go to a major event hosted by Frank, with all the other couples in participation. Frank welcomes Jack onto the stage, where he declares to the crowd that he is promoting Jack to work with the senior counseling board. Everybody cheers, whereas Frank begins a chant of, "Whose world is this? Ours." Alice steps out and is found by Bunny. Alice tries to clarify that something isn't right, but Bunny tells her to stop making presumptions. The other day, Alice and Jack host a dinner welcoming Frank and Shelley, Bill and Violet, and another couple, Peg and Peter. During the dinner, Alice brings up a few things she's noticed, such as the ladies all having the same story about how they met their husbands, and that most of the ladies come from Philadelphia, Chicago, or Baltimore. Alice, at that point, straightforwardly accuses Frank of being behind something vile, which Shelley chastises her for. But Frank tells Alice secretly that he was hoping for somebody like her to challenge him. Alice afterward confronts Jack over the circumstance and asks him to leave. He appears to agree, and they make it to the car until the men in ruddy suits appear and drag Alice out of the car, with her shouting and arguing with Jack to assist. But he can only sit in his car, shouting in regret. She is taken to a clinic, where a procedure is performed on her. A flashback then starts, showing Alice working as a nurse at a clinic. She is seen living with Jack in a crummy flat, and he is disillusioned that she doesn't want to do anything with him since she works so long and is unimaginably tired. Jack listens to Frank's motivational speeches and is first motivated to join the Victory Project, which it turns out could be a virtual reenactment that the husbands utilize to keep their wives caught to serve their needs and wants. When Alice touched the mirror, she was waking herself up until Jack made it so that she may stay there. He lays next to her her, while his own intellect is connected to Victory. Back inside Victory, Alice returns after apparently being healed by the doctors. However, Alice argues with Jack once more, who says he did all of this for her. Indeed, in spite of the fact that she was substance living her own life, of her own office in the real world. He holds on to her, and in a struggle to break free, Alice crushes an alcohol glass over Jack's head, slaughtering him. In Victory and in the real world, the higher-ups are alerted to this, and things in the community start to go haywire, such as the road bulbs bursting suddenly. Bunny tells Alice that she knew the truth all along, which even her claim that kids aren't real. So, she empowers her to take Dean's car and drive to HQ to put an end to things. Alice then drives out into the desert with the ruddy suits chasing after her. Collins pursues as well, but Alice hits the brakes and causes Collins to collide with a few of the ruddy suits, killing them all. More cars start to give chase until Alice makes it to the mountain. In the meantime, Frank learns of Alice's deeds, inciting Shelley to wound him in the intestine. She says he messed everything up for failing to keep this contained, and she pronounces, "It's my turn now." Alice gets the car stuck on the side of the mountain, blocking the way upwards. The ruddy suits start to climb the mountain to chase her. Alice makes it to the mirror and briefly feels as though Jack is behind her, inquiring her to stay for him. She runs to the mirror just before the ruddy suits reach her. Cut to dark, and the final thing we listen to is Alice wheezing as she wakes up within the real world. So that's the end of our movie.